Hey everyone, it's Jody Sutter of the Sutter Company, and welcome to LinkedIn Live, Just Ask Jody Live. We are going to be talking about new business outreach, outbound, with a good friend of mine, Dan Englander, who is the owner of a Sales Schema. Before we get to that conversation, though, I just wanted to let you know about a couple of things. This year, this is the third year I've done it. I am going to be offering a master class in early December on how to create an effective and simple annual plan for new business. It's called the New Business Blueprint, and you can learn more by going to thesuttercompany.com/new-business-blueprint. We'll also leave the information in the comments below after we finish recording. This is a great way for you to not only devote some time to do this very important and sometimes under leveraged task that you should be doing on an annual basis, but I really want to help you make it simple and easy to do. So please do think about joining us for the New Business Blueprint. All right, today I'm with Dan, but I'm without my faithful teammate, Megan, who is a little bit under the weather. So I'm going to be trying to manage everything with style and grace. Please do, if folks are watching this live, please do comment and ask questions while we've got Dan here. Let me bring him on. As I said, today my guest is Dan Englander of Sales Schema, who is an expert in outbound for agencies, and I've watched Sales Schema grow and become more successful. Hey, Dan, over the course of the last few years, actually, how long have you been in business now?
Since 2014, which is wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's about the time it was like a couple of years after I started my business. And yeah, it feels like yesterday, but pretty terrifying when you realize it is 10 years ago.
Yeah, and the early year or two was very different business. I mean, I started it from a rest stop in Ho Chi Minh City when I was being a digital nomad. I remember registering the domain name there. So, yeah, very different business
That's
back
awesome.
then.
Yeah. I haven't done that digital nomad thing yet. Maybe later. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I know there are a few things in your life, good things that are keeping you a little more anchored to the New York City area where you're based. But
Yes.
I don't know, maybe there's digital nomad lifestyle in our future once again. But anyway,
We can hope.
it's really great to see you. And I'm like I said, I feel really fortunate that you and I have known each other for the last 10 years. Um, you know, I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder because you have recently transitioned your business to a slightly new model. When we first met, you were doing outbound for agencies, and now you're still doing that, but it's more of a teaching them how to do that and how to set themselves up for success rather than doing it for them. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, and I can definitely dig more into that, but, what we've sort of found, like, from doing this a long time is that our clients are better, faster, stronger, while it may take more time by owning instead of renting, basically, and by building this out in-house. I think part of that is there's a process to find your voice as an agency when you're going from referrals to something that others can do and others can sell for you, and I think that outbound can be a lot more powerful than just getting meetings and just pipeline. And it can be an exercise for like building that clarity and so on. And that's something that, when we're teaching people how to do it, they're able to get more of that value than if they're just renting out,
Yeah.
a black box basically.
Sort of teach a man or a woman to fish rather than provide them with the fish.
Exactly. I could have just said that. A lot less words and energy.
That was perfect.
Yep.
One of the concepts that you've also developed is this idea of relationships at scale. And I thought maybe that would be a good place to start also. Could you tell me a little bit about what that means and why agencies should care?
For sure. So to start out with the why behind it, I think that whenever you're selling something where the benefits don't get to be enjoyed until weeks or months after you've delivered it, the main gap you're trying to get over is not really awareness. It's not like you're selling like the newest tech widget or an electric car. You're selling a complex service, and the biggest gap to get over is really a trust gap. Um, and it took me, it's not like I figured that out day one. It took us, first me selling agency services in a previous life, then doing it for clients for a long time and having it work and then decline steeply as this trend is sort of accelerated with more competition
Mm.
and noise, to getting to this point where everything we do is kind of the relationship sales and scale methodology. So what is it exactly? It's sort of based on this idea that we we don't always rationally agree to meetings based on uh, all sorts of value being provided and information. People are taking meetings with each other based on signals that are a lot more irrational. And our hypothesis and our experience has been that it's really based on the trust that happens through people being in each other's worlds. That can be on a business or an industry level, like, hey, this is somebody I want in my life because they know a lot about fintech and I'm a fintech marketing leader. And it can also be on a very personal level, like this person is in my backyard and I probably see them every day, or this person is going to a conference that I'm thinking of going to or may go to. So this is what's funny about this is when I talk about this, most agency executives are like, this is what I do every day, when I'm networking and I'm trying to get meetings and I'm reaching out to people. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like combining old with new. I think what's old is becoming new again. The thing that's new about these
Interesting.
programs that's different is adding digitally empowered leverage and scale to it. So oftentimes when I say relationship sales at scale, people like put up a defense because they're like, well, you can only maintain so many relationships, right? Which is absolutely true. But what we found is that there is this whole layer of people that we refer to as the lukewarms who you might not have a relationship with yet, but would be willing to talk to you if you sent them the right words and addressed the right commonality. So that's kind of the
Yeah.
way we're thinking about outreach. And there's a lot more that goes into that. A lot of it is also making the process more simple, more manageable, more tasteful, so that if you have a small sales team or it's just you as an owner, you can actually run this thing as opposed to like adding 5 channels at once and trying to make some complex funnel that probably isn't right
Yeah.
for the market. So I've blabbered a lot. I'll leave it there.
I think it's really interesting, and I will also admit. So right now, you and I, well, I don't know if it's still current, but we have occasionally shared clients. I recently referred one of my clients to you. I've been working with him on business development strategy that's right for his small production company and business development coaching. Um, I recommended that he talk to you for your outbounds or do it with you program, and he shared with me some of the technique and the strategy. You know, I want to make sure that I'm articulate here. So one of the things that I always bothered me as when I was doing outbound for myself as well as for when I was running agency business development teams and doing the outbound, I always it rubbed me the wrong way when people would be like, "Hey, we went to the same college," or "Hey, I see you went to such and such. Go team." And that always felt a little bit forced, like you were forcing a connection. However, in watching my client work with some of the techniques that you taught him, it really is amazing how many times that sort of more authentic connection works. And you mentioned, I can't remember the phrase that you used, but it was sort of the psychological trigger, the psychological lever that you use with integrity. But it really does, like, it causes us, it's almost like we get as the target of the outrage, we get sort of caught into that story and we just feel a little bit more compelled to connect with this person. It's like our human instinct says, okay, this person is less risky, already building that trust. And I just thought that was really interesting, and I've seen firsthand how it works. Maybe not in every tribe, but a good deal of them.
Thank you for that. Yeah. I think so first off, the commonality approach does help a lot because it just puts you a level above what 99% of other people are doing, which is trying to massively scale everything overnight, right? And the issue with that is like what's inherently valuable or dynamics that are scarce, right? So being able to connect with somebody based on a business or personal commonality, it's not always going to work. It's not always like the most, persuasive thing in the world, but it's a
Yeah.
cut above what everybody else is doing because most people aren't willing to do these campaigns that have a certain like ceiling baked into them. But the reality is you can just keep running a bunch of them forever and be getting better returns from it. Beyond that,
Excellent.
I think that it's easy to sort of say, well, people reach out to reference the same college or these things, and it doesn't really work. But I think a lot of it is kind of based on like the subtlety of the copy. And that's a lot of a lot of where our hard work with clients goes to, is like going back and forth on that approach to get it right. I just thought of this now, but it's almost like an in the matrix, outside of the matrix kind of thing. Like when you get an email from somebody that you've met before, for some reason it just looks different. Like you open it, you don't even know
Yeah.
why you're opening it. Um, there's just something about it. It doesn't really, like, there is more personalization and they are referencing something that somebody that doesn't know you wouldn't reference, but it's sort of more than that. There's like a vibe to it. And that's really what we're trying to
Yeah.
capture with the copywriting we're working on.
Yeah, you're right. It's very subtle. And it does have to be, I think there are a couple of things also I observed. One is that it has to be authentic. Like you can't make it up. If there's no connection there, then you can't create a connection or commonality. I should say that's a better term that you use. And also, what I found is that then you need to follow it up. In your method, it looks like you followed up quite quickly with the value proposition. So, quick point of commonality, and then into the here's what we do, here's why you might want to care about it. And I thought that was strong too. So you then legitimize your pitch very quickly as well.
Yeah, and a lot of that is really kind of a less is more thing. I think that
Mhm.
sometimes we have an easier time with those agency owners that aren't really copywriters, that like for example creative designers, because they don't have to unlearn a bunch of stuff. They can just start fresh, because a lot of the times, like, what works in marketing land, what works for creating that landing page or sending that mass email to your newsletter about a new offer you have, is a completely different thing for getting this sort of like one-to-one outreach approach to get a meeting, where even though
Yeah,
somebody might be on a short list you've built, you want the vibe to feel like one-to-one. So it's really kind of like
yeah.
unlearning things a lot of the time.
I also find that in general, agencies, at least the ones that I work with, they tend to be very generous, and they almost generous and polite and sort of, people pleasing. That's a generalization, I know. So maybe some of you out there are rolling your eyes, but in general, it's there's this tendency, I think, for agencies to want to share and to feel like that quick 2 to 3 sentence introductory email is either curt or doesn't offer enough or doesn't give them a reason enough. And so it becomes a 2 to 3 paragraph, maybe with 2 to 3 PDF case studies attached, just because more is more, but it's not true. It's less less is more in this case. And I think it's because um, we as human beings, we respond first to any incoming message with our lizard brain, with our amygdala, and our amygdala wants to know, like, it's a fight or flight response. Like, is this going to take more time than I can spend? Does it require more brain energy than I want to spend right now? And that's where that really brief, relevant set of statements, 2 to 3 sentences, makes a difference. You're much more likely to appease the amygdala and allow your message to get up to the neocortex, where then they can start to have a deeper conversation with you about what you do.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It kind of reminds me of that saying, like, you can have it all, just not at the same time, basically. Uh, and in some ways, it's not unlike other marketing funnels. Like, all we're trying to do with the email is get to the next action. And the next action is
Yeah.
actually not them buying from you. It's not even them going through whatever, a demo or tour, whatever you want to call it. It's really just de-risking like a 30-minute call, right? So I think
Yes.
when you think of it as de-risking, it actually makes the exercise a lot easier. And then, people please away, go for it. Just don't do it with people that aren't engaged with you at all yet, because it's not worth their
Right.
time or yours. Yeah.
I think that's such a great point. Also, it gives you can keep, you keep more of your ammo over time, because you will need to sustain that conversation over time. So save that case study for the next communication, if you don't get a response on the first time, because that doesn't always happen.
Right. And I think that a lot of the times where outreach goes wrong, there's a bunch of ways it can go wrong. But It's because people are either putting themselves at a much higher level than their prospect or a much lower level, right? So
Oh, interesting.
with the higher level thing, this is like most marketing copy that you read. And depending on how spammy or salesy it is, it's saying like, I have this offer, it's limited time, it's scarce. We've gotten results for these people. And if you don't do it, you're a loser. That's kind of the vibe of most kind of hard sell marketing. I'm making a little bit of a generalization or like,
Yeah, yeah,
pantomiming it. And then so there's that. And then most sales copy, like your typical BDR style outreach is putting oneself at a lower level than the prospect and saying, would you please
yes,
spare 5 minutes
so
of your
true.
time if only, and I'll cut off my finger if I offend you kind of thing. What we
Yeah,
need to do through subtlety and through different signals is put ourselves at the same level as the prospect and being able to say, if because that's the reality. If your agency is specialized or it's getting into the process of becoming specialized, you have insider knowledge that is very valuable to that prospect. And if you're doing this right, like you are miles above 99% of the people that's in that person's inbox. We just have to communicate that subtly the right way. And oftentimes,
yeah,
like less is more. Like one of the early campaigns that inspired this approach was a 2-line email where we said, I saw you used to work for Symantec. We've done a lot of work for them. You're at HP now. We should probably talk. And that was it. And they got dozens of meetings, right? So it's not always about more case studies and collateral and so on.
that is such a great example, and I hope that for people who are listening to this live, go back to the recording and grab that. It is such a great example of how simple that psychological point of commonality can be. And yeah, and like you said, it's not foolproof, but psychologically, as the person receiving that email, it's just, it's almost like it's harder to pull yourself away. It's harder to just put it in the bottom of your inbox or hit delete before going, "Ugh." And that's kind of what you want. You want to increase your chances. I think such interesting. Um, Let me ask you this also. I have a bunch of questions for you, because I have a bunch of questions that I think are probably in the minds of people who are going to be listening, watching this. So email. We've I think we hear a lot these days about how email doesn't work. A lot of my clients say, like, I sent out a bunch of emails, I didn't get anything. No one responds to email. No one looks at their inbox, or they no one, everyone has their inbox set up so they can avoid stuff coming from people like me. So why should we keep sending email,
Yeah, great question.
or should
So
we?
there's a few things to piece apart there for me to, and then I'll answer that question. The first is whenever you're getting beyond something like a referral or something where somebody's directly sent to you, you are contending with vast amounts of noise. Like if you wanted to set up an ad funnel, you're dealing with noise. If you were doing outreach on LinkedIn, you're dealing with people scrolling a million articles. You're dealing with noise. You're dealing with noise anywhere. That and with that in mind, like each channel has its own unique pros and cons. We're not monotheists about email. We like to start with one channel because if you add more, it can get you like incrementally more benefit, but with like, exponentially more work and time. So if you're, a busy owner doing a million things, walk before you run kind of thing. And so that's all, those are all the disclaimers before I talk about email. And it's
Okay.
also less about the channel and more about the approach and the people you're selecting, what you're saying to them, and so on, as opposed to just getting obsessed with the channel. So with all that said, the reasons we like starting with email are a few. I think the first is that it scales more easily than the other channels. And more importantly, you own it. Nobody owns email. It's
Yeah,
a
I think that's
protocol.
very important. Yeah.
Right. While there's tech companies that are interfacing with email and determining like what goes into each inbox, it's predicated on the idea that you have to be able to contact people you don't know, and you have to be able to contact people in a one to many fashion, right? So
Yeah.
there's only so much that can be done to limit what goes where, and with that in mind, like it's still where we go to make plans and do business. It's been strong since the 70s. Whatever tech platform comes along, the first thing they do is ask you to put in an email. So
Yeah.
all that said, there's plenty to criticize about it, but that's why we like it as a starting point.
Yeah. That's great. But then, as you said, you're not monotheistic about it. You will intersperse, or you recommend interspersing LinkedIn messages. How do you feel about text messages, SMS messages?
Good question. I think it's contextual, right? I think that if you were
Mm.
selling to SMBs and you're selling to restaurant owners running around a floor,
Hmm.
probably text and phone could make sense as a starting point. They're probably reading email a little bit less. For our
Interesting.
clients that are mostly selling B2B, selling, upmarket-ish, selling
Enterprise.
into, enterprise and not necessarily just enterprise, but, people that are active white collar workers, email is often a better starting point because they're just used to talking to strangers there than other places. That said, as you get more skilled at it and as you have more time, you can integrate other channels mid funnel, right? So that could be a LinkedIn touch point. It could be SMS,
Mm.
once you have somebody that's engaged on some level. And
Yeah.
that's usually the way we start to kind of introduce extra channels.
What about phone? Have you completely abandoned using the phone?
No, I love the phone. Again,
Mm.
I think that it's just a matter of like what's the most result for the effort you're putting in. So
Yeah.
I don't think cold calling is a good use of time for most people selling into established companies. A lot of reasons: the
Hmm.
data, the fact that we don't pick up calls from people we don't know, the fact that sending a bunch of custom voicemails doesn't work really well. Um, we could go down an AI rabbit hole and kind of how I feel about that in a second, but again, I think the phone can be really powerful mid funnel. So like it just depends on the time and resources you have, right? I think what's
And
tough is sorry, go ahead. Yeah, we're guys.
I was going to say, and mid funnel being once you've got someone, once maybe they've replied to your email, maybe you've even had some sort of introductory conversation, and then you go into like a nurturing sequence. Is that what you're referring to as mid funnel?
Exactly. It could be that, or somebody responds with some questions. They say, "Hey, like
I
I
see.
I, I want to talk. I'm interested, but I have these questions about these things. Hey, I thought I'd give you a ring.
Mm,
Is this a
gotcha.
bad time?" Right? Like that can go
Yeah.
so
Yes.
far, even if it's just a
Yeah.
voicemail. But at that point, that's not 100 calls a day. That's like a handful a week, maybe.
Right.
Right. So that becomes
Yes.
manageable. I think where people get this wrong is they go find some fancy template online and they're like, I know I'll get a VA to make these calls. And all of a sudden it's like you have person B responding to a message from person A and it's like this Rube Goldberg hairball machine. and and also like it's sort of just annoying prospects because they can't make sense of who's who and so on. So that's our whole thing is just keep it simple, expand it
Yeah.
out from there. Yeah.
Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, a lot of what you offer now when you work with clients is helping them make the right decisions around the tools and resources, the tech stack that they build. I would love, and I'm sure lots of people would love to know, what should an agency be investing in, and is it, maybe even and like ranking them, like what's the bare minimum you need, what's maybe something a little bit above bare minimum, and then what's maybe might be more advanced. And I don't know, maybe that's a big question
No,
for
it's not. And I
for
can
a
get
half an hour LinkedIn live, but
no, I'm happy to get into it. So I think the first thing is don't use the tech products as a way to avoid doing the hard work. The hard work being setting up and
mm,
launching campaigns that are imperfect and that getting shipping and getting stuff out the door, contacting your market, like that's all more important than getting the perfect tech stack. That
okay.
said, so assuming those boxes are checked, I think that agility is much more important than perfection. So
Mm,
it's better to get the tech product that does 80% of what you need, but that you can quit like every month, as opposed to getting stuck in these long-term contracts. The problem that we see is agencies. This happens literally once every 2 weeks. I'll talk to an agency owner that's like, yeah, thinking about doing outbound. So we signed up for Zoom Info. We're in a year-long contract with them, and it's like $X thousand. We know from
mm,
doing this that 80% of the time, there are cheaper solutions that will do what the Zoom Info will do.
yeah, yeah,
Or the same goes with like a HubSpot. HubSpot can be really powerful, but you need people to run it. It's a machine. You need fuel to feed into it.
yeah, yeah.
So what we recommend for tech stack is first, this is not going to interfere with your CRM. If you have a CRM that you're happy with, outbound is existing on a layer external from that. Also,
Okay.
like in our experience, there's platforms that are built for outbound There's other platforms that try to do outbound and a bunch of other stuff, and they don't really do it that well.
And they're built for outbound because they can do a lot. Like, again, that scale thing where
Yeah,
you're talking about sending out hundreds of emails versus a dozen.
exactly. And they're just built for the little nuances of outbound, like creating an email that looks
Mm.
very organic and real, as opposed to
Mhm.
having like a template sort of thing. Um, so for us, we like Apollo right now. It's, there's
Yeah,
other
I've been intrigued with that
platforms that
too.
will do other stuff, and data you may draw from different wells for data at different times. But we like Apollo right now because it has the data in one place. The data is very powerful. I've interviewed their head of product on our show, Matt Lincoln.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to
Yeah,
look that
and
up.
and
Well,
basically,
actually, send me the link so that we can put that in the comments and
yeah,
people can watch that too.
yeah, will do. It was a great interview. But from his perspective, like basically what they're building is the Costco of data, is the way he described it. So it's a very powerful data platform. It might
Interesting.
not do everything that you ever need it to do, but it'll do what most
Yeah.
agencies need. So that's why. And there's a few other ancillary
Okay.
tools that are going down a nerdy rabbit hole that we use, but that's pretty much the center of it.
Whereas like Zoom Info is more like the Bergdorf Goodman of data platforms, in that they're quite expensive. I actually don't have a lot of personal experience. I have some personal experience with Zoom Info, not enough to actually come out with an opinion. So I will keep that. So I won't do that. But it's Apollo. What one of the things that I quite like about Apollo is that it is very affordable, especially for someone who's like, I just want to dabble it with it. I want to see. And it seems like you still need to do a fair amount of work with Zoom in order to manipulate, massage the data that's going to be right for you and not get inundated. I mean, it's easy to get one of these platforms and put in a few search items and get, 13,000 names. But then you got to deal with those 13,000 names.
Exactly. And I also just think that people sometimes use the sophistication of the platforms to avoid doing the actual work, right? So it's like, I want to get into
Interesting.
intent data and find the people that are ready to buy right now. And it's like, that sounds really
Oh
great.
my gosh. Okay, can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah,
Have
yeah.
you ever seen that work?
The short answer is yes, it can
Okay, that's
work.
good.
I think that it's not sustainable though, right? Because
Mm,
intent data can be, first of all, I'm not knocking it, it has its place, but let's say, but the it's sort of a needle in the haystack problem, right? Because like if you're talking about, I want to find the companies that are in our strike zone that are looking for digital transformation right now. Well, first off, it's going to be the small, tiny little pool of companies. The data is not perfect, so chances are like most of them aren't really looking, because this
mm,
stuff's kind of very hit or miss. And then let's say you do use it and you do get a relationship with that company while they're looking, great, nothing wrong with that. But they're usually going to be going with the company that built the relationship with them weeks or months prior, right? That has built back to the
right.
beginning of the interview, like trust. So our whole thing
Yeah.
is just don't, like, there's a time and place to do that. It's not bad, but you may as well just start engaging your market with the goal of building relationships.
Yeah.
That's already going to
It's
be
not
enough to do. Yeah.
it's not the golden goose. Like it's the old fashioned version of that. And again, back when I was running business development teams, and this used to drive me crazy when my CEO would say, I just read there's an article in ad week that I don't know, whatever, like that trying to think of like a good brand, the PepsiCo, or like that they're putting that they're going into review. Like there's an RFP out. And it was always by the time the trades were writing about it, it was already like 2 months into a 4 month review, and it was impossible to get in. So yeah, it was a sense of, well, we've got the information, we've got to act on it, but that information isn't always good. Much better to build that relationship, as you said, build trust, so that you're already in the consideration set way before they decide they want to that they have or they have to put it out to tender. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And it makes you proactive instead of reactive and so on. And that's how you build a
yeah,
strong business, whatever you want to achieve, basically. Yeah.
yeah. Um, this always happens to me, but I'm looking at my timer countdown, and we are 40 seconds away to the bottom of the hour. And typically, I like to try because I know that people that are watching this, you've got limited time. But if it's okay, Dan, I'd love to maybe go over a couple of minutes because there are a couple of things I wanted to ask you around things that I think, trends that we're seeing that do not make our clients terribly comfortable. One of those trends is the trust recession that is hard to build trust. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about, we talked a lot about this importance of trust. Are you finding that it's harder, and what are you doing to offset some of that difficulty?
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, I'm good to go till the top of the hour, basically. So
Okay, all right.
that's fine with me. So yeah. So first off, like I've written a lot about how getting over the trust gap is a big thing. And this was from my book, which was published in 2022. I did
Yeah.
not create the label trust recession, so I just don't want to take credit for that. But I think a lot of other people much smarter than me have identified the same thing.
Yeah.
So why is that? Why is that a thing? I think it's a few reasons. I won't go down the most conceptual version, which I think has to deal with the fact that we're not inventing as much cool new technology as we used to. So everybody's kind of swarming
Mm,
onto the same old stuff. But I think the bigger reason is that there's just as part of that, there's a lot of competition both for business, indirectly and directly through more globalized
yes.
world and increasingly AI, and also just competition for attention writ large, right? So I think that what's happening is that markets are moving faster through these stages of sophistication, and they're getting much more to this most aware stage where they might not be an expert on whatever you do, but
Um,
they understand generally what you do. And really, it's more about, are you in my world, and can I trust you? So I think that there's more than one way to approach that problem. The first is to know that just because you're up against that and you're kind of facing this more mature market doesn't mean you have a bad business. There's businesses that can be very successful in mature markets, and in some way, and there's pros and cons to being in them. I think bigger than just any particular outreach tactic, I think something that you and I talk a lot about, but becoming more specialized is
yeah.
really becoming like table stakes for that kind of thing. um, Verticalization is probably the easiest way to do it, the most straightforward. It may not be the only way though, but basically focusing on solving, distinct problems for distinct groups of
Yeah.
buyers. That makes everything else easier. Like historically, we get more meetings than our clients because right on our site, because everybody goes to the website before they take a meeting, it says we help agencies solve this problem, right? So I'm not saying it's always easy and there's never tweaks you need to make, but that makes everything else a lot easier. Beyond that, I think it's back to de-risking conversations based on tribe and sort of doing the
Yeah.
stuff that feels a little more irrational, that isn't always the hey, check out this white paper sort of approach, but
Yeah.
creates the effect where people will literally tell us, prospects will tell us, I don't know why I took this meeting, but there's something different about the copy. So those are a couple different
Right.
ways we've seen approach that. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. I think you talk about tribe and tribe building, and I will often like walk my clients through, what I see as the buyer's journey for buying agency services, and you get again sort of mid journey or mid to late sales journey, and this tribe building I think is really important. I think you in your approach, you bring it in really early with those commonalities, which I think is also interesting. Maybe I'll adjust my journey, but um, yeah, I think that is super interesting. There was something else I was going to say about that, and I've totally like lost it. Phew. Anyway, yes, de-risking and building trust. Anyway, you said it
Yeah.
better than whatever I was about to say. Anyway.
Well, I think the other thing which you might have mentioned before we started was how that ties to like longer sales cycles.
Oh yes, well that's the other thing I wanted to ask you. Absolutely.
Okay.
So yeah, longer sales cycles. People ask me all the time, like, how do I get someone to close sooner? How do I prevent someone from ghosting me? I don't know if I've ever come up with the perfect answer, but I'd love to hear your point of view.
Yeah, it's a really good thing to focus on, and we're actually like in the process of revamping a lot of the ways we do things. Like we're developing marketing automations and using Go High Level and all this stuff, which I won't necessarily go down
Mhm.
that rabbit hole. I think a lot of it is there's the tactical, like logistical side, and then there's the emotional side of it. And I think the emotional side is important, and a lot of like what all these tactics do is they make you less outcome dependent on a deal going a certain way, right? So as far as like shortening sales cycles, it's really like there's some things that salespeople can do to create urgency and stuff, but really it's more about having more opportunities and then
Yes.
finding
The
out what
ability to walk away.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
finding out what's going on so that you can optimize your process and walk away, or either walk away sooner, or better is like nurturing people in a
Yeah.
different way through
Yeah. No
marketing.
one's, they're not answering that door anymore. So I'm going to go knock on this door or knock on these other doors that are promising, as opposed to just relying on that one door. They seem like they were going to open it and then they slammed it shut and they just won't open it again.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So as I'm sort of like shooting from the hip here, but as time's gone on, I'm sort of like, well, I'm not sure that sales is about persuading somebody and taking somebody from like
Yeah.
0 to 10. It's really more about taking people from like 7 to 10, or at most like 6 to 10, right?
Mm.
So if somebody's like a 3, it's really more about creating a situation where you can
Wait,
find out they're a
and just
3.
for context, so
Yeah.
the 1 to 10 being, or 0 to 10, 0 being like I have absolutely no interest in talking to you, to the 10 being I need to hire you today, and moving from the like that's sort of anywhere between 3 to 8 is sort of like, well, I could hire you, but I need a little more information, or I need more time, or I need some validation. And the closer, of course, you get to 10, the more likely it is they're going to hire you. And most salespeople have a strategy within there. What do you need to do to get a 3 to a 5, 5 to a 7, 7 to 9? Great.
Exactly. And a lot of what we're doing with outreach is like sometimes it's lead generation, right? Sometimes like the timing is
Okay.
good and you're in the
Yep.
right place at the right time. But I think a healthier mindset for outreach is really thinking of it as a relationship building channel. So
Hmm.
we should probably articulate, I should probably like build this into a training with like the number system or whatever. But a lot of
Yeah.
what it is like taking somebody that's a 3 and getting them to a 6. So then your content and your marketing can take them from a 6 to a 10. And what that looks like is them saying, hey, we chatted a few months ago,
Yes.
saw your email about this. Like timing's better now. We should probably talk or whatever. That's
Yeah.
kind of the
Yeah.
idea. I think another thing to mention there is that if you're an agency owner and you're listening to this and most of your business comes from referrals, chances are you have never seen your real sales cycle. You've only seen the tail end of it. So a
Oh, that's
lot
such a
of
good
it
point.
is getting used to just seeing your whole sales cycle from somebody being problem aware to somebody being solution aware and closing, right? Which is, guess what, a
Yeah.
lot longer than you probably think it is.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's so. In other words, they're doing all this homework on their end. And again, you have to be lucky enough that you're somehow in their orbit. So as they're doing that homework, they are thinking of you. So that's, yeah, when they do actually make the call, you think, well, yeah, this was easier. This is a shorter cycle. But in fact, no, they may have been thinking about this for months.
Yeah.
The other thing sort of tied to that, and I remember what I was going to say, you were talking about, again, the trust building and how people will go to a website before they say yes to a meeting. That's something I talk about a lot, about the narrative, the sort of those narrative crumbs you are leaving all over the place, and that you can work so hard on that outbound campaign. And then, I have sort of a graphic for this in one of my trainings. It's like, so they get your email. Let's say that email is good enough. It gets their attention. They don't respond right away. They go to your website, and your website either reinforces a positive impression or doesn't, or undermines it, in which case, boom, you've lost them. But maybe they go to their website, and then maybe they go to your LinkedIn page, and maybe they go to a company LinkedIn page, and maybe they even like Google you and find like some random Pinterest board from 5 years ago when you were like, it was your like wedding registry Pinterest board. And nothing wrong with that, but like just to be aware that when you put yourself out there, people will be looking at the overall story, and you cannot you can influence, you can control the parts of the components, but you can't control the narrative that's going to form in their head, or you can only influence it. And I think I think that's really what you said. Really good point. They're going to go to your website before they say yes to a meeting.
Yeah, we all want the funnel to look like something that somebody puts on a PowerPoint, but it's really more like a corn maze. Like I just went through that with my wife and son because it's
I love
right
that
before
corn maze.
Halloween, right? And it's like that's
Yeah.
the reality is like it's just this chaotic thing, and like you can
Hmm.
influence it in different ways, but it's gonna be a
Yeah.
mess. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we've dealt with that too. Like our message has sharpened over time. There's still like people will still find courses I did on
Yeah.
Udemy from 2016. I'm like, oh, don't
Uh,
don't go, don't see
yeah.
that.
I know. I can't claim that I'm perfect about that too, but I think it also goes back to sort of having a sense of like what is our position in the marketplace? What are the message that we deliver consistently? Who are we delivering them to? And that shows them, rather than like, well, let's be all things to all people on our website, but which will undermine a really targeted email campaign. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of it is just starting simple, starting with the
yeah,
people that are already likely to trust you and
yeah.
getting something out the door. Yeah.
Dan, this has been so great. Thank you so much. I feel like we covered a lot, but there's probably a lot more we could cover. Is there anything that I didn't bring up that is you think is really important to deliver a message to deliver to hopefully a vast audience of agency owners who may be watching live but not commenting, and maybe watching the recording too?
Yeah, I think this could probably be a whole other episode, so I'll try to keep it brief without any promises. But I think before getting into the what, which is what we've covered, you really want to start with the who's doing this kind of thing. Chances
Oh,
are,
that's a really good point.
yeah, chances are, like, if you're listening to this and you're an owner, it's probably you, unless you
Hmm.
have a salesperson that you really trust that's really good. But mostly we're
Yeah,
starting with the owner. So what that means
yeah,
is clearing off enough fulfillment and ops stuff so that you can focus on sales instead of prematurely hiring for sales. So answering the who question, most important thing. Yeah.
yes, right. So I want to make sure that people can get in touch with you if they'd like to. So first, I'm going to just give folks your email address, and then also you mentioned a an event that's coming up that
Um,
you wanted to make sure people knew about.
Not an event, but we have a new video
Oh,
training. That's okay.
okay.
Same idea. It's a digital event, and that's that link below, which is
Yeah.
salesschema.com/Jody. It'll go to our site. So it's about a 50-minute video training. It's all about what we do. It has like specific tactics. It's how we recommend thinking about who's doing what and setting up outbound as an effective channel long term.
Oh, cool. So it would be a great continuation from this conversation if it's something they want to learn more about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, I think I'm gonna have to have you back on another time because, like I said, I think there's so many things we didn't touch on. So, but thank you so much for joining me today, Dan. And let's do this again soon.
Yeah, this was so fun, Jody. Thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thanks.